Sophie Mokoena. Well, in other news, South Sudan, the newest and youngest country in the world, continues to be under the spotlight. This as the peace process and a coalition government, which was supposed to have been formed by mid-November, remains on, well, we're told, shaky ground. International groups are warning that the country could slide back into fighting. And in studio today, we are joined by a special guest, a visiting journalist, Mading Ngor. He is popularly known as one of the lost boys of Sudan. Let's speak to the man himself. Mading, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Welcome to SABC. Welcome to South Africa. I want to get to know you a bit and get our viewers to understand what you've been through, because you've been through a lot. Tell us about you fleeing your country. Where did you go, and what sort of challenges did you face during your journey?
Thank you for having me on the agenda. And I've been in South Africa for the last few weeks to learn new skills in the media. Media has a critical role to play in a democracy, and in the context of South Africa, how does it hold the rainbow nation together? And it is the glue. So in South Sudan, you have mentioned the youngest nation. It went through one of the longest civil wars in Africa, and I was caught up in that war. I was born on the day the war started in the same place. And 8 years later, I had to run away, run with my mother and siblings. We were running in the jungle because the liberation struggle was being fought by the African tribes. And at some point, there was a disagreement along ethnic lines, and one of the factions attacked my village and committed a massacre. I escaped. It was very vicious killing that I witnessed. You would see a dead person, a dead cattle, everywhere we went. We roamed the jungles of South Sudan, and we were feeding on wild fruits. So that took many days, and eventually myself and my mother, we ended up in a refugee camp in Kenya. And of course, I always wanted to have a future for myself, so I got an opportunity in 2001 to be one of the lost boys that made it to the Western world. Some went to Canada, some went to America. I was in Canada, and in Canada I learned to be a journalist because my story always kept reminding me about expressing it and letting the world know about it.
No doubt those memories of the past are etched in your mind, and I kind of guess that it shaped who you are. As well as how you tell your story as well. You, I understand, returned back to the country in April 2011 to South Sudan, just 3 months before the country's independence. Correct?
Absolutely.
What was Independence Day like for you?
Thank you. The story, indeed, my experience stayed with me, and that is what shaped me. And when I was in Canada, I was always thinking about the civil war, about Sudan, and a time when we are going to have a country of our own, which killed many of the people that I loved. So I studied journalism, and I knew that I had a calling. I knew that I had to go back one day, and I had that opportunity to be in South Sudan just a few months before the independence. And of course, the eve of independence was incredible. The youth were running on the street saying, "We are free at last." And at first I was sleeping, but then I said I was missing out because I came to witness the independence. So I went out and I saw how amazed the people were. And to experience independence as a journalist, but also as someone who was a victim of that war, was exhilarating. I knew that I wanted to contribute, so I had the opportunity of starting a radio show, a morning show, and it gave me an opportunity to really express the ideals of the liberation, which is for freedom of expression and development. There are many things we fought against, such as centralization. But in the new nation, there was corruption. Those problems were still prevalent. So my experience in the civil war gave me the energy to champion our story.
It's great to have you in studio because it gives us a window into what South Sudan is all about. Currently, you mentioned freedom of expression. What's the situation? How free are journalists to tell the story of South Sudan?
South Sudan is going through transition, a very critical transition. Since I came back in 2011, there have been problems in the media. I personally got myself in trouble because I spoke my mind. And I thought that is what we fought, so that we are free. And I've been arrested many times, and at one point was banned from the National Assembly because there were people who didn't like my journalism, the fact that I gave everyone a platform. So indeed, there are so many challenges that the media are facing. Some have been killed in the line of their duty, and there is some kind of censorship. But of course, since South Sudan is going through a transition, there is an opportunity to shape South Sudan into what the freedom fighters was looking for. They wanted a free country,
right,
and the media has that opportunity. Now, there are inherent factors, internal challenges facing the media. There's lack of capacity, and even the idea of media is non-existent. So you have the state broadcaster, which is SABC. That is the one I'm associated with.
Right.
So we have to be able to use that to build a nation.
And like any other country, the media plays such a critical role in the development of that country, isn't it?
And it's even more critical in the case of South Sudan, because you have a country where there's always a tendency to organize along ethnic lines. So the idea of the nation is often missed. And so the media have to be able to play the role of the nationalists. And this is why I've been fascinated about what I have seen in South Africa, and to have the opportunity of being at SABC, see the robust infrastructure that exists, which is not in my country, and the work, the incredible work that is being done. Media indeed is the glue.
You know, in the aftermath of the peace deal that between President Salva Kiir as well as the opposition leader Riek Machar, are you getting reports that more and more South Sudanese refugees are coming back home?
Of course, the war created a humanitarian catastrophe, displaced thousands of people, and there's a lot of hunger, and even as we speak, there are many floods that are happening, and because people are caught up at war, the humanitarian, the development agenda is being missed, and it will take a while for the people to come back. So the war has consequences, and people are internally displaced. So, and now they are yearning for that peace, for the leaders to be able to reach a compromise and constitute a national unity government by the end of February, and that will allow the South Sudanese to come back and build a nation.
Are you finding, you're talking about strengthening the media as well, are you finding that other countries on the African continent are paying attention, keeping a close eye on South Sudan in order to effect change in a more speedy, at a pace, that will lead to the development of this country? Indeed,
the region has been involved. So when the civil war ensued in 2013, the IGAD region was able to intervene and bring the two factions together, and there was a peace deal. That peace failed, and then again there was a war, and that war there was also mediation by the region, and so indeed Africa has a stake in what happens in South Sudan, because many of the refugees, they go to Uganda, they go to Kenya, they go to Sudan, to the neighboring countries. So what happened in South Sudan has implications in the region. So the region and the African continent has been seized of the matter. And David Mabuza, who has been shuttling between the warring factions. So indeed we are going to have peace, because Africa is saying enough is enough.
So you are optimistic in that regard,
I have to be optimistic, because if I remember the darkest days during the liberation and how long we have come, I used to be a refugee, and now I have a passport. So I have to be optimistic.
You have to, it's so interesting. You mentioned the dark days, from that region. Talk to us. We mentioned this earlier on. You are one of the so-called lost boys. For those that are not familiar with that term, just break it down for us a bit.
Well, the story of the lost boys, you had miners who were taken from their homes in the late 80s, and the idea was to take them to a place where they can get education, they can pick up some skills. Many of them also ended up being child soldiers, and they trekked until they came to the Ugandan, Kenyan refugee camp, Kakuma refugee camp, and in 2000, many of them were lucky to be taken for a settlement in the West because the humanitarian organizations were able to champion their story. So the Lost Boys are a generation who were deprived of being with their parents and growing up. We grew up fast on our own. And many of us were able to use that as an opportunity to learn, an opportunity to be able to come back and build a new nation.
Fascinating, gripping history, no doubt. And Mading, thank you very much indeed for coming here and giving us, I guess, this window into the animus as well as the optimism, as you say, in South Sudan. So we will be picking your brain. You will be hanging around the studio, no doubt. So we'll be talking much more with regards to what's happening back home as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. That was journalist Mading Ngor.